Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome again to the COPEC Daily Financial Wellness Webcast. We're delighted you're with us today. I hope everybody had a nice long weekend, and here it is Tuesday at 2 o'clock. So, as I think most of you know, if you've tuned in before, but we might have some new people, we broadcast daily starting at 2 o'clock, with the exception of maybe some holidays like we had yesterday. So our program is a conversation type program lasting from 2 to 2:30 generally. And then we go into an extended question and answer period to make sure that we address questions that you might have. So today our topic is Dementia Untangled with Lori Wengerd. I'll introduce Lori in just another couple minutes. But first of all, we do want to share, and I think we've been sharing our disclosure with you, and a number of our speakers do take part in the financial service industry, and those speakers are also sometimes part of the COPEC Board of Directors. So you've had a chance to look that over, feel free, and then we'll tell you a little bit more about COPEC. COPEC started in approximately 2004. It's a nonprofit organization. Its strict mission is to provide educational programs to the community without any sales pressure or marketing pressure. So it's strictly educational in nature. We do have the programs daily. As I mentioned, once in a while we do have a connectivity problem. We hope that won't happen today, but if so, please bear with us and we'll get things working as soon as possible. And we do want to invite you to share any of these programs with people that you may know that may have an interest in the topics presented, or maybe you're part of an organization that can benefit by these. On the right side of the slide, you see a number of our speakers and their expertise. Stay tuned because you'll hear from all of those throughout the year. So I do want to bring to your attention the copeceducation.org website. I invite you to go into there frequently. You will enter into a financial wellness portal, which has about 6 different tiles concerning our educational programs. As you see here, the one tile, of course, you might have used today in signing up for the program, lists our daily programs, and also with the orange tiles there, you can look ahead and, for instance, see a month in a glance the programs that are coming up, who's speaking, and what the topics are. So we'd love to have you join us every day, but again, you may want to focus on certain programs listed. Another tile is retirement decisions. Those are programs we offer about 2 to 3 times a year. We really get into in-depth programming on retirement in general, particularly suited for those maybe 5 to 10 years from retirement. And again, we've had those at the Fawcett Center frequently because of the virus. We're doing those on virtual as well. So I think we have one coming up actually September 17th. At 12 o'clock and then a repeat at 5:30. So please join us for that, and you can sign up on this particular tile of the website. And then, of course, on Fridays, we have what we call Financial Fridays. Not always, but generally focused towards a retirement issue of some sort. And those are actually at 11 o'clock, more of a lecture type series where we're really getting more into in-depth on a lot of the topics that we'll be covering. And then, as I mentioned before, if you're a part of another nonprofit or maybe a part of a corporation or any kind of a club of sorts, please feel free to contact us if you'd like a special type of program for that organization. And finally, and importantly, a tile is available for a 15-minute consultation that all of our speakers generally offer for you following their topic. And you can sign up and have a one-on-one session. Maybe you've had a question that didn't get fully explored, or maybe there's a question more of a personal nature. So that is our COPEC website, and we invite you at all times to join us there. So without further ado, we're going to talk with Lori again today. She's been with us before and a great resource for all kinds of information on home care, long-term care, facilities. And today, a very, very important subject, dementia, as her title is Dementia Untangled. And Lori, thanks for joining us. And I'll say that this seems to be on the mind of about everybody now. has had maybe some experience with it, but we all can learn more about it. So help us out there.
Yeah, Jerry, no, you're right. I mean, in studies that I've seen recently that talk about people's biggest fears as they age, certainly cancer is up there. The inability to drive is high for men. The fear of being taken care of versus taking care of people is high on the list for women. But across the board, there is an increased fear in dementia. And I think it's because we all now pretty much know somebody who's had it, of whatever form of dementia that would have been diagnosed as, but we now know what that looks like, and we know what that can do to somebody and how that can impact their ability to function. So it's a great source of fear for a lot of people, and there's a lot of studies and a lot of recommendations, a lot of YouTube videos that talk about how not to get dementia.
And that's actually a question that I had, the difference maybe between dementia and Alzheimer's, are they one and the same?
Yeah, because that is a very important point, Jerry, because a lot of people, you'll hear me use dementia overall, because really dementia is just the overall term. It doesn't really have a medical diagnosis attached to it, except to say that when you are not able to do your daily, you're not able to do your daily functions because of your cognitive impairment, no matter what causes it, that's called dementia. So dementia is kind of the overarching term for people who have cognitive impairment. And I'll put up a slide right here that kind of shows what the other, hang on here. So that should be shared now. What you'll see is some of the more common types of dementia. So Alzheimer's disease is one that I would say is probably is the most prevalent of all the types of dementia, but it's not the majority. You take these other types of dementia and add them together, and they're the majority. But Alzheimer's is the most prevalent type of dementia, and that's something that really impacts memory, the memory part of your brain. So people who have Alzheimer's, you'll see that you've heard stories. They retain their long-term memory for a longer period of time, but that short-term memory of what's happening on TV, the repeating things over and over again, that is a sure sign of Alzheimer's disease. There's vascular dementia, people who have usually problems with blood pressure, cholesterol, can have what's called vascular dementia, and that is often when there's mini strokes that are happening in the brain, and depending on which part of the brain is impacted, that will tell you which part of your emotions or your memory, what part of your function is going to be impacted. Dementia with Lewy body is often associated with Parkinson's disease, but not always. I've known quite a few people, including my own dad, who had Lewy body dementia. Frontotemporal dementia is, just as it sounds, it's dementia that happens here in the front part of the brain. People who have frontotemporal dementia can often, just like with Lewy body, can often still have memory. They're able to retain their memory. They're able to remember who people are. They can have conversations, but there are other things going on with speech often. They lose their ability sometimes to speak or to find the right words. It's not a memory issue. It's a speech function issue. They have different issues with their emotions. Many times their behaviors might be a little bit interesting and odd. And that's often a sign of frontotemporal dementia. And then there are other types of dementia that's caused by Parkinson's, people who have alcohol-related diseases. If they don't, will eventually most likely end up with dementia, Huntington's disease, brain injury, and then there's a lot of other genetic and disease conditions that are associated with it. But the top 4 listed there, and some of them are irreversible. Some of them have no cure, no treatment, but there are other causes of dementia too. And let me see if it's on. Right. So and we use, again, dementia meaning cognitive function. So it's really important for any of us to seek a diagnosis if we are worried about our cognitive impairment, because there are other things, as I put on this slide, that can impact your ability to think and react well. Medication can have, the side effects of medication can have a huge impact on our abilities. Metabolic and hormonal imbalances, I think everybody can understand how that can impact our thinking. Chemotherapy, people who've had chemotherapy will tell you they call it chemo brain sometimes, and there is evidence that shows that sometimes people with chemotherapy lose some cognitive function, but it can come back, not always. Deficiencies in vitamin nutrients, that can be a good thing if that's what it is. We find a lot of times that B12, for example, and magnesium and other vitamins can really boost your cognitive abilities. Delirium and infections, these are often things that happen in a hospital, will impact your ability to act in your normal way. Lack of sleep, we all have felt that, right? So people who really are sleep deprived with repeated issues with sleep will find that they have cognitive impairment. They may not know that that's the cause of it, but let a doctor help decide that. And then anxiety and depression also do cause some negative impact on your brain as well.
Again, this isn't to be confused with the natural aging process of forgetfulness, I hope, because even last night I went upstairs and by the time I got up there, I couldn't quite remember why I went upstairs. So, but
there are a lot of things, Jerry. That's a really good point. There are a lot of things that happen to us as we age, but we shouldn't assume that things are normal, right? I mean, I know, for example, things like gray hair, that happens almost to everybody as they age. Skin elasticity, our cognition is impacted, but in a different way than we might think. Like we certainly are slower at retrieving words sometimes as we age. We are slower at processing things. I know that if I'm in a large group now and everybody's talking like a family setting, that I have a harder time as I get older following all that's going on. So some of that is normal. And Jerry, certainly one of them is that concept of going into another room and not remembering why you were there. The difference though, Jerry, you probably, when you got there, were able to retrace your steps, right? And say, oh, that's right, I was down in the kitchen. I was reaching in the fridge. That made me think of orange juice, which made me think of my orange gum, whatever. You're able to retrace your steps.
Right.
That is what can be the clue that tells you that you're okay. It's when you are not able to retrace those steps. You get to the bedroom and you say, why am I here? But you can't remember how you even got there. That short-term memory has impacted you in that way.
Laura, I don't know if you want to address this a little bit later, but we're hearing more and more hopeful signs that there might be some treatments, or I'm not sure it's at the cure level, but can you mention a few things on that?
Yeah. So it's funny, Jerry, because I think everybody would like to think that there are cures and treatments coming around the corner. There are certainly studies that are showing promise, but those are all, they tend to be like the studies that have some footing to them they're able to detect Alzheimer's earlier. They're able to see signs of Alzheimer's earlier. They tend to be more about detection than they do about doing anything about it. So it's a little frustrating for me as someone who's been impacted by having two parents with dementia and being in the business where I see what having dementia can do to a family. It's a completely different impairment than somebody who loses their ability to walk even. So when you lose your ability to, when you lose your cognition, you lose so much more and you make caring for you so much harder than if you have some other disabilities. So there are some studies that are showing some promises, but really so to give you an example, Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death in the out of the top 10, 6 of the top 10. It's the only one in the top 10 that has no treatment, no cure, no early diagnosis. So there's a couple things that we're finding that can make a difference, but we've all seen examples of people who do exactly what they should be doing and still get Alzheimer's. So that's what makes it hard.
Well, you've touched on this a little bit, but can you kind of review some of the signs that we should look for with family members that might tip us off?
I will put this up. So I do have a slide here.
Oh, okay.
This is actually, I'm good that you led me into this and I was ready to go with it. This actually comes from the Alzheimer's Association that will help you. I mean, this is their, I don't know if there's 10 there or I combined some, but this is the list that the Alzheimer's Association puts out for people who really wanted to check themselves and check their loved ones. So I think what I have found 9 times out of 10, when we're talking to somebody who says, I think my mother or my father, or my spouse might be having some, be experiencing some dementia, 9 times out of 10, they're right, because we all want to not think that this is going to happen to our loved ones. So we kind of let it go unnoticed, or we're in denial for a long time until we finally admit it out loud. So you will find, this is a good list though, memory loss that disrupts your daily life. So Jerry, we often run upstairs, can't remember why we're there, but we're able to find out why we got there and remember why we got there. So it's not disruptive to our daily life. But when we're forgetting things like, the fact that we even have to write our bills, we have to pay our bills, forgetting appointments and not even realizing we even forgot them, just waiting till the call comes and said you didn't come to your appointment today, that we're reminded that we're not doing that. Challenges in planning, difficulty completing familiar tasks. I mean, things that you've always done, and now you're like, how does this toothpaste and toothbrush, how does this work? Just having those lapses in memory. Confusion of time and place. I mean, I know most mornings when I wake up, I'm like, what day is this? Where am I? That's normal because it will come back to me. But imagine those moments throughout the day when you're feeling like, where am I? What time is it? What day is it? They can come and go, but that's a hard thing to start feeling. Difficulty understanding visual images, things that just don't make sense to you. Looking at carpet that has a lot of flowers and trying to figure out, like, what is that on the floor? Even if it's just a split second, that's a sign that there might be some cognitive impairment. New problems with words. So if you were always good at, having a big vocabulary, now that has gone, that could be a sign. Here's the one, not being able to retrace your steps. This is something we discussed just a little bit ago, Jerry. Decreased judgment. I mean, people going outside in the winter without a sweater on. Change in mood. We see this happening a lot with people with dementia, and part of it is, I think, because they're recognizing that things are off. So they're going to be feel a little bit differently, and that's going to show in how they behave. And withdrawal from activities. Again, I saw this happening with my own mom as her Alzheimer's progressed, is that she knew that something was going on, and she just didn't want to do as much as she used to. So if you see any of these signs, it's really important to get a diagnosis, to at least talk to your primary care physician to figure out what might be next.
Well, then once you identify a loved one that has these symptoms, what steps should they take then to take action?
Yeah, so once you find out that if we go back to the list I had before, that's really important. That's why this is why a diagnosis is important, Jerry, because I think sometimes a primary care physician can at least be a good starting point, because they will be able to look at the medication that's being taken. They'll be able to look at all these other possible influences and rule things out, because a lot of these types of dementia don't have an easy diagnosis that goes with them. Vascular dementia can be seen by CAT scans, and I'm not sure of all the details, but through that kind of imaging, you can see vascular dementia. But some of these others, they aren't really visible to a physician. So there are cognitive tests that can be given, as we all know from our president, having talked about his own cognitive test recently. And those are certainly important measures of cognition. So once you realize that there are some issues with cognition, it's important to start recognizing that, yes, we will try to treat this. We will do what we can to keep this at bay. There are some medications that will keep Alzheimer's at bay for a while anyway. It's worth doing all of that, but that's also a prime sign that things have to change for a family. Primary among those would be perhaps, making sure that that the loved one who's caring for them is up to the task, that there's an understanding of what this disease entails. Support groups through the Alzheimer's Association or other organizations like that are incredibly important for a lot of loved ones whose spouse or parents have Alzheimer's or other type of dementia, because you need to share that with other people and learn about their skills and tricks, how they deal with it. But like I said, looking at financial information is really important. If there's a loved one who can get involved in the care, and suggests that the bill pay goes online so that somebody else in the family can help participate in making sure bills are getting paid, making sure that they're safe at home. If they are living alone, how can they live at home safely? So there's just a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration once dementia is a part of someone's life. And I would say that one of the first things is having that hard conversation about not driving, because that's where a lot of issues come into play.
And it seems like there's different stages of this. People being able to keep their loved one at home, but there may become a point where that's not possible, or maybe they've even gotten aggressive. Or can you mention some of the different maybe stages that occur?
Yeah, depending on, going back to this again, Alzheimer's is known for its stages of disease, but the other ones don't quite have that same kind of definition to them. What we do know is that, except for vascular dementia, these other types of dementia are progressive. So if it's not something that comes from lack of sleep or nutrition or vitamin deficiencies, then it's probably going to get worse. So if everybody is so different in how their disease progresses. So it's really important to be ready for what that might look like. But Jerry, it's funny because you say, as long, keep them at home as long as they can, or people tend to say that. And we know firsthand from our business that with the right kind of care, you can stay home forever. I mean, it's not that, somebody's going to get so bad that they have to go to a facility. It just is a matter of what does the family want, for them. So both of my parents died in their home with around the clock care, and both had dementia, and they were, it was very important for them to be there. My dad didn't, because he had Lewy body, he did not lose his memory. He was able to tool around the house that he had, built, and feel like he had as normal of a life as he could feel like he had at that time. So it is possible to keep loved ones at home forever. It's just a matter of having that discussion as a family about where, what you see the future being. But as far as aggression goes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And if they can get the right kind of care at home, have the ability, time, and maybe money to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the right care is out there. It's just a matter of finding it, for sure.
You mentioned something about your dad that was of interest, and maybe you've elaborated on this, but that it wasn't all about memory with him.
Yeah, I'm going to show you. I actually have a slide. So thanks again, Jerry, for asking a question you didn't know I had a slide about, I don't think. Oh, shoot. I don't have it right now. I want to show you the normal. So memory is just one type of cognition that we have. So it's, but there are really 5 domains of our brain function. So memory is one, and Alzheimer's attacks memory. That's a sure sign of that. But attention is another domain of the brain. So you can have problems with the attention side of your brain, look very much like ADHD. So sometimes not remembering something is because you never filed it away to begin with. You didn't pay close enough attention to something to put it into your memory and keep it there. So visual spatial cognition is another domain of the brain. So it's like people who, you think about like walking up to a curb and not knowing that it's a curb. And how do you step up or down, or, that's the kind of thing that can happen when people lose that visual spatial abilities. My dad lost a lot of that. He couldn't tell how far down a chair was. He could put his hand out and not tell if something was close or far. Then there is executive function, which is a term that people use even like for children who might have problems with, planning, how to get from A to B. So executive function is something that can be impacted by any types of brain injury or dementia. And that's, like I said, the ability to plan something, the ability to know, if I do this, then I do this, this will be the outcome. So you might still have your memory in all of those cases, except, that I just mentioned, but you're not able to still function in a way that would be able to keep you safe and let you have a life that you're used to having.
I always thought it was a disease for older people, but in my personal life and with clients, I know that younger people are now attracting this. is that a trend, or does anybody have an explanation of why this is happening to younger people?
Yeah, I think what we're finding, I'm not an expert on this part of it, but I do know that the Alzheimer's, when people you start seeing the signs for Alzheimer's in older adults, it tends to be people in their mid 70s and older, and you start to kind of see things progress slowly. And there doesn't seem to be a genetic component necessarily, or very low percentage of those types of Alzheimer's are genetic. Then when people are experiencing cognitive decline, specifically Alzheimer's or frontotemporal dementia in their earlier 50s, 60s, there could have a genetic component to that. So sometimes they will have relatives who experience the same thing. But Jerry, it's interesting because there's so much how do you really pinpoint what causes dementia, right? There's so much in our environment. It could be something that's environmental. There is a connection between weed killer, for example. I mean, as we all heard, because of the recent lawsuits of DuPont for Roundup, people with Parkinson's and cancer and different kinds of dementia have been exposed to. A lot of times they're farmers. They've been exposed to weed killer like that. So there's really a lot that we have to consider. And the frustrating thing for me is to just not see much progress made in this part of our domain or of our world. So I'm going to show you something. So I know you were kind of maybe alluding to what can we do, because there are some things we can do. It doesn't do any good to say, well, I'm probably going to get it, so to heck with it. I'm going to, live my life the way I want to live it. Right. That's fine too. But if you do want to do what you can to keep your brain health strong, there's just a list here of some things that I have put up here on the screen for all of you to see. So there is some things we can do. We do know that, and I do, when I talk about just aging well in general, 1/3 of our healthy and our health and our longevity, 1/3 of it's genetics. 2/3 of how we age is the choices that we make. So we do have to all be better about making choices that are going to be good for our heart, good for our brain, because it just makes sense.
Well, you mentioned that. Do you have any more detail on the genetic aspect of that? In other words, if my grandfather or grandmother had it, what about me? I mean, is there any statistics that help us or maybe worry us about that?
Yeah, there are genetic markers, but again, if they are contracting when they're older, it's not as likely as being a genetic type of Alzheimer's. It's when people remember Pat Summitt, who was the women's basketball coach for Tennessee. Right. I think she was maybe in her late 50s when she was found to have Alzheimer's. So that's more likely to be a genetic mutation. So there is genetic testing that can be done for that, if you think that that's what it is. But I said, even if you don't have that genetic mutation, doesn't mean you're not going to have dementia, right? That's only that you won't have the genetic type of dementia. You might still have another kind of dementia, depending on your life choices and other things that we're not sure what happens. And you asked earlier about any studies. I wanted to point out on this slide that I'm showing, the second bullet down, healthy weight and blood pressure. So one of the only findings that I've really seen the Alzheimer's Association promote as being like a definite finding is this impact of blood pressure on your brain health. And they are now saying, and if your primary care physician should have heard this by now, they're saying you need to keep your blood pressure, that top number, the systolic number, at 120 or below, right? It used to be 140, but now they're saying 120 and below, and they're finding a definite correlation between blood pressure that's higher than 120 and Alzheimer's. So not quite sure, how deep they're not quite sure how deep that correlation is, but it is there. So that's why this slide is up here, just knowing that it's, that there are some things we can do for sure.
We could talk about this slide quite a bit. I know you have some other programs. Brain health, I think, is one that may may come up a little later
Yeah,
in the year.
brain fitness, yeah.
I can't help but ask about the dietary ideas a little bit before you leave us today, because I know you have a real interest in that. What is your diet all about?
You know, it's interesting because we're all imperfect. I mean, I can't pass up French fries when I'm at certain restaurants. But we do know, I mean, I think we all know it. Like, I don't think anybody right now, we all get it. I mean, if you can identify, I call it whole foods and not the store, but whole foods. If you can look at what you're eating and identify it, you look at a carrot, that's a carrot. You look at tomatoes, that's a tomato. You look at soup, oh, there's chicken broth and there's a carrot and there's a piece of chicken. If you can look at things and identify what's in it, that's a good diet. It's when we start eating the things that are, open a can and we can't necessarily define what's in it. Even things like bread. I mean, you can't look at a piece of bread and say, well, there's this much sugar and salt and potato. So if you think about eating whole foods, like you put together a salad and you throw some shrimp on top, you can identify everything that's a part of that salad. And even when it comes down to dressing, I mean, really being good about choosing the right dressing that goes with it. That's also called Mediterranean diet, or however you want to define it. But it's really important for us to focus on what we eat as well. And they used to say, like, eat for your heart. Eat. Now they're saying what's good for your heart is good for your brain. So keep that in mind. And it makes sense. Your brain really is, an organ that relies so much on oxygen. Look at how much brain damage is done when you lose a little bit of oxygen when you stop breathing. So keep in mind how important the heart health is to the brain.
I would love to go on and on about this subject, but we've reached our time limit, I guess. So we're just going to have you back again before long. We do thank you so much, Lori, for joining us again, taking time out of your busy schedule. I failed to mention, of course, Lori owns her own home care agency, Home Care Assistance, located in Upper Arlington at the Tremont Center. So Lori is just a great resource for us. And I know she is willing to do these individual consultations as well. So for those of you listening, if you have a particular need, I hope Lori would agree to be able to be accessible to you. I think actually throughout the process, we've answered most of the questions. So I guess it's time for us to say depart, but encourage you to join us again tomorrow for our next program, and for many in the future. So thank you, Lori, and thank you folks for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks.